as I've been introduced, I'm Maggie Ngwira from Malawi. I work with Trocaire Malawi on a program that's being funded by the Scottish government in collaboration. We're implementing it in collaboration with SCIAF and local partners in Malawi. So the program is called Climate Challenge Program Malawi, which is there because of the need coming in because of climate change. So that is common. It's happened in my family, but also it's common to the people that we work with, the people that we reach out in the program. So they will tell you, when you ask them about climate change, they will tell you that I plant my maize. Maize is a stable, gives us stable meal. We call it nsima. It's made from maize flour. So they'll tell you that I plant maize, but it doesn't, either it's being washed away by the floods or it dries out because of the dry spells. And I can't keep on replanting. In the end, I have to buy, which is a challenge in itself. So just to put also in perspective, where is Malawi? We're a southern African country. I'm sure everyone should know about Malawi because of our relationship with David Livingstone. Yeah, so I should not spend a lot of time on that. But we are, so putting also things in perspective, we're landlocked. We are a tropical climate region, and we are agro-based. So a lot of our GDP comes from agriculture. And we're a very young population. So as of the last census, which was last year, about 51% were young people under 35. So from our Malawian perspective, our understanding of climate change, what we see as climate change are mainly two things. It's floods, it's drought. We also have elements of hailstorm, also strong winds, but these are sort of localized in a few areas. But the main ones, you'd have floods and droughts. And usually these are interchanging, so they're alternating. If this year we have, for example, this year we've had cyclone Idai, which is the floods, and then next year you would expect that we would have floods. Or in some instances, you would have these two things in the same year. So you would have a long dry spell, and then following that you would have floods. But another thing is that these things are, the floods and the droughts, they're increasing in magnitude and the intensity, the severity of the floods, but also the scope. So initially, I think 5 years or so ago, we were looking at nine districts in the country of the 28 that were flood disaster prone, but now we're reaching to 15. So the area of coverage of the disasters of the hazards, of climate hazards, is increasing as well. So Cyclone Idai, I'm sure we all heard about it, but as for Malawi, so Cyclone Idai affected Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. As for Malawi, about nearly 1,000 people were affected, I would say, and then 60 deaths were identified. People passed immediately, but also there was over 600 people that were injured, and the people displaced were over 1,000 were displaced. And putting the figures to it, the economic figures to it, were hitting about $220 million US, or in the different elements that would be affected. So we're looking at housing, infrastructure, we're looking at health, we're looking at food. All those combined would give us a damage of $220 million US, which is about, I think, 170 something pounds. So why are we here? I'm sure James made a very good presentation on that. why we're here is that because of the carbon emissions. Funny enough is that, I think it's been said, we don't contribute that much to the emissions. So we contribute about, as of 2015, we're contributing about 0.07% of all the global emissions, carbon emissions. When other countries, I think, are hitting about, is it Kuwait that is at 45%? Canada is at 25%. We're contributing 0.07. But the fact, the problem is that because of the underlying factors, issues that are there, the vulnerabilities that are there, just a slight change in the temperature. So our temperature has increased by 0.9% since 1960 to 2006. So under less 1%, the increase in temperature. But we're the worst hit because of the underlying vulnerabilities and other causes. So at the national level, at local level, Malawi, what are the things that are putting us at this vulnerable position? I would say immediately, there's a lot of deforestation. Deforestation for two reasons. One is because the things that we've been talking about, energy, so we're looking for energy to cook, to heat ourselves, but also we're looking at land to grow food, to build our houses, okay? So as at now, and only 10% of our population is connected to the national grid. So we are 17 million as of the last census, 17.5 million. Only 10% are connected to the national grid, which is hydro-powered. So the rest of us would be going to charcoal or firewood. And our population is increasing at, is it 2.9% annually, which is like the third highest in Southern Africa. So we need to have food, we need to have land to live on. So therefore we continue on to clear land. And deforestation, I think, is one of the highest in the Southern Hemisphere as well. So we are 26% of our forests are being cleared annually. So because of this, just a little rain would cause flood because of a lot of erosion as well. And then there's also, we also have an issue of sustainable urbanization. Everyone wants to come to Lilongwe, to the capital city. Everyone wants the bright lights of Blantyre. We have Blantyre as well, our commercial city. So we are confined in that small area, but not everyone has the resources to live, to build structures or to build a house that would resist a strong wind or would resist a little rain. So in the end, that is what we're going to have. So on the this, what is this? This is my left. Yes, that is Zomba. Zomba is the capital, is a city as well. In 2015, the first time that a city of Zomba was hit by a flood. That was the level of water that came with that flood. And the next one on the right is the recent cyclone Idai. So, what is this bringing to, what are the impacts to the economy? What are the impacts to different aspects of our country, I would say? So on the economy is that a lot, as I've said, we are agro-based. So our economy, everything that we own, everything that how we generate our income is dependent on the natural resources. Is dependent on the environment. That is also very sensitive. So this is Blantyre, 2015, strong winds with floods. So you see a lot of destruction as well. So because of the underlying vulnerabilities, there's little capacity for people to resist, to be able to absorb the shocks that come with extreme weather events. So on the economy side also, this is the cyclone Idai. You grow your maize. So one unfortunate thing with the cyclone Idai is that it came when the maize had already matured. So you're ready to harvest in a week or in 2 weeks, and then that's when it hits. So people had invested in that, but then they lost everything. So like I'm saying, that the dependence on the climate sensitive environment for our livelihoods, but also would say most of it, there's little diversification. So you'd see that if a home is totally dependent on their farming, or there's a lot of other activities that would be dependent on that agricultural activities. So any change in that affects the economy from the household, but also at the national level. Because like, for example, you'd say that 90% of our exports, so we export a lot of tobacco and cotton, are dependent on agriculture. And at the household level, at least 80% of every of Malawian are in the agro sector. So 8 of every 10 people are in the agriculture field. In my home, for example, my dad was in the tobacco industry. My mom is a farmer. So you find that any change in that would affect the household income. And then, so on the food section, there's also impact on the food. Apart from the economist aspect, we're also looking at the food. Our food mostly is produced rain-fed, so there's less of irrigation, most of rain-fed. So mostly would plant once a year. So meaning that if anything happens to that, then you're food insecure. We do vulnerability assessments every year, and you find that as of last year, I think there was 3.3 million people were at risk of being food insecure. So nearly 75% of our household income would come from agriculture. Any change on that, then the prices of the food would also shift. So for example, right now, the people that we're working with in the southern part of Malawi, which was where the cyclone Idai was so much, the maize prices have increased by 30% within 2 months, within 2 to 3 months. So you're hit by the cyclone Idai, and then the maize prices are also increasing, and you can't afford to buy that food. So even though the relief activities are done, people have gone back, have returned to their homes, but now they can't afford to buy food. So the food insecurity leads to a lot of other effects, implications, I would say. So looking at cases of malnutrition, especially in the young ones, and then you're also looking at issues of transactional sex. This would come a lot if you have conversation with the communities, especially for the women, because they have, I think Lorna has mentioned to say that motherly nature, you would want your kids to eat. This is also exacerbated bit because the men would leave. Okay, I want to go to town because I want to find other means of generating income. So they'll leave the mother at the home. What do? You don't have food. You have to find means to make your kid eat. But also looking at early pregnancies and marriages, and then you're also looking at child labor, and you're looking at, because of those early marriages and early pregnancies, then you also have issues of gender-based violence. And for the girl child, there's a lot of school dropout because you either married off because that man will take care of you, and then you'll be able to take care of your family. So these things are more like interconnected, they're relating into each other. Another thing is that the water access. So this is one of our areas that we're working in Zomba. That is where they get their water, a shallow well. When there's drought, obviously the water table is going to go down. So you can get, the water supply is reduced, the water quality is reduced, but also then you're going back to hydroelectric power, which we depend on, is going. So every time in the dry season, we have, like right now, we have what we call blackouts or load shedding, where we're sharing power. So every day every day, you have 6 hours of no lights. So every day. This gets even worse when there's dry spells, because our Shire River, the one that we generate electricity from, gets drier, or the water levels go down. So this quote is from one of our areas in Dedza where we work from. So a girl would tell you that is a very common situation, people going to get water on the head. And then when it gets drier, it even gets difficult. It hurts carrying the water on the head, but then in the morning, it means I have to do this in the morning, but I have to go to school as well. So I can't study, and I don't like school anymore because I keep fading. So climate change makes this even more worse. But then climate change is also a gendered, it's gendered, I would say, because more women are the front of the effects of climate change because of the productive situation that they have, but also the social responsibility that they hold. So in Malawi, you'd find that a lot of men are the ones that grow cash crops, so tobacco or cotton, because they're going to sell it and they're going to get money. For the women, mostly it's just maize because they want to feed their children. So, but also men have the possibility of having other means of generating income. So they would have businesses, but the woman would just depend on their farming. So because of all these different elements, women, not that men are not affected, but they're most at the front of the effects of climate change. So when we're doing our interventions, we're looking at interventions that are incognizant of this element that men and women, or the population dynamics is affected differently because in the face of climate change. So what are we doing about it with a program that we're working on? We understand that the rural communities should be at the center of tackling the effects of climate change, because they are the ones that are facing these effects of climate change. So they are better placed to come up with solutions that they can uphold as well. So we're working on elements of food, water, and energy. We're making sure that our production takes an understanding that the climate is changing. So we're promoting agroecology, but also we're looking at resources that locally available resources of generating better access to water. And we're also ensuring that you generate income generating activities that are drawn out from use of non-renewable energies. So we're discouraging, more like discouraging deforestation to get charcoal. So we have that, for example, on our right, where the communities have solar-powered income-generating activities. But also we're looking at increasing climate literacy. Our communities should understand that their lifestyles have effect on their climate change, on their environment. Because when they understand that, then they're better placed to make choices that would help them change. But also working with young people, because we understand. I was happy when I attended the strike yesterday because there was a lot of young people. So it brought me home that they're understanding that if we have to change, we have to change. We have a local saying that you start when someone is young, if you have to change their mind. So work with young people to do that. So what can we do better? I think we've had this discussion. For us, being in Malawi, climate change is not a myth. It's not something to debate on. It's not something that we have to question even. It's something that we see every day. Our everyday being is affected by climate change. Because of that, because it affects our very livelihood, people are very easy to adapt to solutions that would make their lives better. Because if you tell me that this technology would help me get better yield, therefore get more food, I would immediately take that. So the communities that I work with, what we have noted is that they are welcoming to solutions that would make their lives better in the face of climate change. But we have, at the international level, I'm glad that COP is coming here next year. At that international level, we should be able to, when we're doing our negotiations, it should not be out of selfish agendas, which unfortunately, having been at COP, is what happens. We're thinking of how can we better our economy? What's in it for us as a country? But we should understand that elsewhere, whatever choices we're making, someone is going to bed hungry. Yeah? But also the commitments that we make, for example, at the international level, we committed to have 100,000 billion US dollars for Green Climate Fund, but we have only committed 3.5? And we have 1 year to go. So the commitments that we're making to help these local communities have other alternative resources. Are we staying true to them? So that is the take for us. Can we honor our pledges that we make? At the tables that we are placed in our discussions, can we remember that someone is going to bed hungry because of the decisions that we make at the international level, that they have nothing to do about? So thank you so much. These are women that we work with in the climate change program Malawi that are seeing the change. One of them says, even if I pass today, the knowledge that I've learned from a better farming system, my kids would have somewhere to start from. Thank you.